Venezuela's Oil Industry by Regina Baxter, Eddie Haydell, Caitlin Melee, Kelly Keene, Ross Redmond, and Lee Atwood.
How would you feel if you were sitting on a chest of buried treasure but you didn't have a shovel to dig out the gold? The Venezuelan people may feel that way because their country sits on one of the biggest oil reserves in the world, but they are struggling in all aspects of oil production. Speaking of Venezuela's oil industry, today we're going to be talking about exploration and production, exports, the Orinoco oil belt, natural gas, refinery, and electricity.
The first commercial oil well was drilled in 1914 in Venezuela, and since then, oil exploration and production has boomed. Greatly due to the efforts of Royal Dutch Shell and the Standard Oil Trust oil companies, Venezuela became the world's second largest oil producer by 1929. Venezuela greatly influenced the creation of OPEC in 1960 in order to combat the low oil prices that occurred during the 1950s and 60s. In 1976, Venezuela nationalized their oil industry with the creation of their national oil company, PDVSA. However, oil exploration suddenly stopped in 2002 due to PDVSA worker strike. Currently, Venezuelan oil exploration has gone beyond the country, and they now have refineries in Brazil, China, and Ecuador. Production has also increased tremendously since the drilling of the first oil well. Oil revenues account for about 95% of Venezuela's export earnings, bringing in $93.57 billion in export revenues. Venezuela produces approximately 2.47 billion barrels per day of oil. The problems that they occur during production is that their crude oil is heavy and sour by international standards.
Venezuela has become one of the leading exporters in the world. At its peak, 3.06 million barrels per day were exported. But ever since Hugo Chavez's election, oil export has been decreasing. Nevertheless, Venezuela continues to be a top exporter. It was ranked 8th largest exporter in the world and largest exporter in the Western Hemisphere. Venezuela relies on the United States for most refining. Not only is the U.S. linked to Venezuela by refining, but also the U.S. imports 40% of what Venezuela produces. Venezuela also exports 31% to the Caribbean, 10% to China, 9% to other Asian countries, 4% to Europe, and 6% to other various countries. While exports to U.S. are declining, exports to China are increasing. Venezuela has had a constant decline with President Chavez's election, but since his decease, Venezuela has a brighter future.
The Orinoco Heavy Oil Belt covers an area 600 kilometers long and 60 kilometers wide. It's geographically divided into 4 separate areas: the Mesquite area, the Zuada area, the Hamaca area, and the Cerro Negro area. In this 54,000 square kilometers, there lie 270 billion barrels of recoverable oil. It's all heavy oil, so it's difficult to recover due to its high viscosity and high vanadium and nickel content. The most successful method in recovering this oil is one that employs dilutants. It makes use of the fact that even though oil is heavy, it is still mobile. A downhole pump pumps oil to the surface, where a very light oil is added to dilute the heavy oil enough to be pumped to an upgrader. At the upgrader, the dilutants are extracted and the heavy oil is upgraded to a medium-grade oil that can be used for production. This lighter oil is called Syncrude. Currently, there are several projects ongoing in the Orinoco Heavy Oil Belt. Each have a 35-year lifespan to extract as much oil as possible. Over $12 billion have been invested in these projects, yet it is estimated at the end of the completion of the projects, only 3% of the total reserves will have been recovered. With further investment in research and advancements in technology, the amount of known recoverable oil could drastically increase. I messed up.
Venezuela has the second largest natural gas reserve in the Western Hemisphere. 70% of domestic gas production is consumed by the petroleum industry, and 35% of the gas outputs are reinjected in order to boost and maintain reservoir pressure. In 1999, they adopted the gas hydrocarbons law that allows private operators to own 100% of non-associated projects. In 2007, Chavez announced public referendum to entitle the state to controlling stake in new gas projects, though the citizens defeated it, and the state has yet to repropose amendments to the gas law.
PDVSA produces the largest amount of natural gas in Venezuela and is also the largest natural gas distributor. Do I need to talk slower?
Paraguana Refining Complex was created through the combining of Amway Refinery, the Bajo Grande Refinery, and the Cardon Refinery. Not only does Venezuela have a number of large refineries domestically, this South American nation also has refineries in foreign countries such as Citgo, Isla, Ruhr al Gham, and Albanias. Through the Venezuelan state oil company PDVSA, its Citgo locations, and other foreign refineries, the Venezuelan nation has control of a substantial amount of refining capacity. The total global refining capacity of Venezuela adds up to 2.8 million barrels of oil per day.
The Venezuelan electricity market has shown quite healthy growth over the last few years, with the exception of 2009. The market is expected to grow through 2016, which will push Venezuela to its electrical limits. Venezuela, which is producing 2.47 million barrels per day of oil in 2011, is one of the top oil distributors in the world, but still has a hard time maintaining a sustainable energy source. The country is growing rapidly, and the electrical branch is following close behind, but there are technological and electrical complications that are slowing Venezuela down. Venezuela's electricity is mostly hydroelectric power, which is generated through natural gravity of falling and flowing water. Venezuelan government began to implement rolling blackouts every 4 hours every other day in some months of 2009 and 2010. All right.